Can the Rabbi explain more about the hashgacha, klali versus prati? I noticed differences in the lashon in the text of the Kriyat Shema and the following. It seems to change lashonot between Rabim and Yachid, and also in our generation, we don't always see hashgacha. We see many times. I think the Gemara also asks.
That's why it's a nes nistar, because we don't see it. We don't know exactly what will come to pass.
Can it also be a test in our generation, which is right before the time of Mashiach, that people don't see the hashgacha and therefore they'll have free will to choose the correct path or not?
It's as you say, but we don't know dofen partani. We cannot be specific about why this happened. Or a person can speculate and think. I think, I understand that Hashem is aiming for this result, for this outcome, and this will lead to A, and this will lead to B, and B will lead to C, and C will lead to D. Maybe that's so, and maybe it's not so.
For example,
speculative.
Returning Klal Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael, for example, and that be an example of hashgacha.
Lichora, we see a long, drawn-out historical process, which has already been going on for over 200 years, whereby Am Yisrael is increasingly returning to Eretz Yisrael. But that doesn't mean that all Jews will decide to return to Eretz Yisrael. Some may stubbornly refuse not to, and that's also okay, so to speak. In other words, okay in the sense that yesh bechira hofshit, there's free will, and Hashem doesn't force a person to do something. But in general, Hashem does force the Jews. In other words, He forces their hand when Jews feel that it's no longer safe to be in France or to be in the UK or to be who knows where. Same is true maybe in the US, or will be true, or whatever it is. We know there has been a rise in anti-Semitism, certainly since the beginning of this war, but even well before that. Much more than years and decades ago, much more. Those of us who remember know this to be a fact. So there seems to be hashgacha, a plan that Hashem is bringing the Jews, opening the gates and pushing them in that direction. But a person can always be extremely stubborn and decide, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do what would seem reasonable to do. Okay, so that's already like it was b'yamei Yetziat Mitzrayim. At the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, many Jews ended up remaining in Mitzrayim. They didn't leave Mitzrayim. They weren't deserving, or they chose for whatever reason not to, and they were left behind.
There was criticism of the Bayesheni, of the people that didn't come back, but I've been reading some of the history from the Yesivas and from the time of the Romans and the Catholic Church, but there was extreme persecution in the land of Israel at that time.
There was.
So it was actually a freer society in Bavel.
If you're referring to the time of following Mered Bar Kochava, no question that was the case, and even before that, true. But the real criticism of Chazal of the Jews who do not return to Eretz Yisrael refers to the beginning of Beit Sheni, when they received the Rishayon, the license from Koresh and his descendants afterwards, Tahshasta, Melech, and all the rest of them. They agreed and were for the Jews returning, and yet a majority chose not to return. At that time, there was no great anti-Semitism. It's true, maybe things were more difficult here than there. We see this in Sefer Ezra, Sefer Nehemiah, all right, we see what we see in Sefer Haggai. It wasn't easy, but it was definitely possible. When there's active persecution in Eretz Yisrael and Jews leave as a result, you don't really see Chazal seriously criticizing people who left the country. Even many of the Chachamim felt they had to flee the country, as we know. And that was apparently the correct thing to do in that extreme situation. There was total shemad poor in Eretz Yisrael. יש גם את זה. It's clear that without the large-scale Jewish presence in Bavel and Paras and those areas, and the Merkaz Torah that grew up in Bavel eventually as a result. Without that, Am Yisrael would not be here today. That's also clearly part of Hashem's plan. There's no question about that.
Is there any machloket and the Ramban, the Hashgacha Pratit, his view of Hashgacha, that everything's a nes necessarily, or is there any other Rishonim argue with like the Ram?
Disagree with the Ramban?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware.
The notion of everything's a nes.
Machon.
Does everybody agree with that?
Nes Nistar, I think everyone agrees. How can you disagree? It says, if you do what I say, you walk in the path that I've laid out for you, then everything will be good.
What about in Golan?
Wait a second. And if you don't, then it will be very bad. This is already mefurash in the Torah many, many times. How can you disagree with that? But how do you understand such a thing? It's not the teva ha'olam that the world should work that way. So it's clearly something beyond the normal, natural DNA of the physical world. It's something that Hashem introduces into the DNA of the physical world and modifies that the DNA with regards to the Jewish people, but after the Jewish people.
That's what about when the Goyim choose to kill? I mean, isn't that their bechira?
It is, but it's also true what it says in the pasuk that this king or that king who shevet api, right? And I'm using him for my purposes. So it's true. He's a rasha gamur, ze barur, but it's also true that Hashem knows how to make use of rashaim as well. We see today here in Eretz Yisrael today, we see how the Erev Rav, the Bagatz, the Praklitut, the Rashi HaShabak, Rashi HaTzava, the Chol Shar HaTzadikim Leminehem, we see clearly that Hashem is allowing them and driving them almost to overplay their hand. It's impossible almost for any normal person not to see who these people are today. It was not so clear to some people a year and a half ago, or 3 years ago, or 5 years ago. Personally, I can tell you it was clear to me 40 years ago, but it was difficult to explain many things to many people at that time. But today everyone sees who these people are, what they're up to, what they're about, what they care about, what matters to them. And their evil, their venality, their wickedness is plain for all to see. And that's also part of, I believe, seems that way to me, I can't prove it. It seems that it's part of Hashem's plan to wake people up and understand that a major change has to come about. That's clear, that if the Jewish people cannot remain in the clutches of these people forever, they have to go. Bezat Hashem, Yizkeh Lechach, Bezat Hashem.